But we would be remiss if we did not start off today's show with one of the more compelling, exciting, and exhilarating, I don't know if I described it right, last night's game between the Yankees and Cleveland Guardians was absolutely one for the ages. A back-and-forth game that these two teams went toe-to-toe, heavyweight fight, use all the analogies you want. But in the end, it was the Cleveland Guardians coming out on top, something that has never happened before in the history of baseball. 2 outs, bottom of the ninth, American League Championship Series. Player hits a home run, and then a 2-run home run by David Fry to end up winning the game. Yankees got to Emmanuel Clase in this game. It was Aaron Judge with the big shot, and then they took the lead. I mean, you had it all in one game last night. I don't know that the playoffs will be able to top it. And if you were watching the broadcasters, by the way, after the game, including former big league pitcher Ron Darling, who played on the 86 Mets, he said it was the very best game that he's ever been a part of. So yes, unfortunately, if you missed last night's game, you missed a piece of history. David Fry had the walk-off shot in that one, a 2-run shot to win the game, and said basically after the game he was rounding the bases and didn't know what was happening.
Yeah, at that point I blacked out. No clue. I just remember being like halfway down the first base line looking back at the dugout, and then I'm looking at Sandy. I'm like, all right, I got to just make sure I touch all 4 bases and get home and celebrate. I guess it was my second at bat off of Weaver. Was no good at all. And I was just like, I just told God, I was like, hey, man, take this. Like, this is a tough matchup. Just try to have fun, and you take the at bat. And got behind in the count and just got a pitch up in the zone, and luckily it went out. It was amazement. It was so much excitement, but then it was just like, oh yeah, of course John Kinsey hit it like game tying homer against a guy throwing 98, and he throws a changeup and he hits it for a homer. Like, nobody does that, but we had, like Voter said, like that's why he's coming into the game. It's like, all right, here you go, big boy. Like, hit a 2-run homer, and he did. Like, so cool.
Yeah, John Kinsey Noel, a name that we may never hear again, and no one's ever heard of before, but he's always going to have a postseason hero on his internet baseball card, his regular baseball card forever. And boy, we have seen a significant shift in the series. The Yankees were minus 800 to win the series going into the game, down to minus 300, also just slight favorites tonight. On the road, Luis Gil against Gavin Williams. Should be a lot of compelling baseball tonight, 8:08 Eastern, between the Yankees and Guardians. Meanwhile, the other series that's going on in New York doesn't seem to be much of one. The Dodgers are now in dominating mode. Shohei Ohtani ended up hitting a home run yesterday. Mookie Betts hit a couple of home runs, and the Dodgers are now 1 win away. They can close it out at Citi Field. Also, Max Muncy's having a heck of a postseason. He's the only player since Reggie Jackson to reach base safely 11 straight times. Jackson did it 12 times in the 77-78 season. They're getting the pitching, they're getting the timely hitting, and I suppose even if LA was to lose tonight in Citi Field, they're overwhelming favorites right now to win the series. They just basically, for those of you who are unfamiliar, just need to win one of the next 3 games. But basically, the pressure now all on Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso. Those hitters are talking about it even after the game. That team executed in LA. The Mets did not.
I mean, they've executed, and we haven't, you know. Yes, I come up with bases loaded and didn't come through. Today we have people on base multiple times and we didn't come through. So, yeah, to your point, you got to execute when people are on base and help your pitching staff. So, you know, we just got to continue to grind our bats and have some timely hitting.
I mean, just having our backs against the walls pretty consistently throughout the year, I mean, it's taught us a lot about our character and who we are and our identity as a team. I mean, we're a super resilient bunch, and we've had to pretty much answer the bell all year, and it's no different now. I mean, it's no different in the playoffs. Like losing the way we have at home, like, is that fun? Is that great? No, it's not. Like, we need to be better, but I think that over the course of this series, like, there's a lot of opportunities to learn from, and we have to apply those lessons tomorrow and moving forward.
And Pete Alonso is right. I mean, the Mets have been up against it, although I don't know that I necessarily agree in one game being down to your last at bat versus now having to win every game the rest of the series. Not sure that that's going to happen, but if it does, it's got to start tonight. 5:08 Eastern. Jack Flaherty starts for the Dodgers. He's been fantastic against David Peterson. You can see that LA is up to 138 on the money line at the FanDuel Sportsbook, total of 7.5. All right, well, if baseball wasn't exciting for you, I'm sorry. Football was a lot worse. One of the most dreadful games you could ever ask for on Thursday Night Football occurred last night. The New Orleans Saints should have just taken a knee from the beginning to the end of the game. What a complete waste of time it was for everybody. But in the end, the Broncos win the game 33-10. If you bet the under, you just wanted to throw something, I guess, probably at your screen at the end of the game, because certainly this one was over at the half. Bo Nix wasn't great, but Javonte Williams did a nice job on the ground. He scored a couple of touchdowns. The Saints just have way too many injuries on the offensive line and on their offense to score points. And Sean Payton went back home and talked about the emotions of winning in New Orleans.
Meant a lot. I think, fortunately, and I say this respectfully, I mean, it was just 2 days of prep and we're here, and so not a lot of sleep. And so it kind of, I think, it keeps your mind off of it because there's so many things you have to get done. And my big concern was just not having enough rest. And so I slept today for a while and then came over here early just to kind of get started going through the game plan again. But it meant a lot because there were a lot of moments here, and you get a chance to see old players that are here, and then to be with this team and this ownership group. It's the reason you miss it. The 1 year out, and you miss relationships, and you miss making memories.
Great career for Sean Payton in New Orleans. Meanwhile, by the way, one of the more bizarre things that has happened in the NFL this season, Denver Broncos 3-0 on the road, haven't won a game at home. Historically speaking, Broncos, one of the best teams in the history of the NFL at Mile High. Can't win there, but can win on the road. Go figure. All right, the Saints aren't going to win a lot of games, let's be honest, the rest of the season. They've lost Raheed Shaheed for the season. He's probably their second best wide receiver next to Chris Olave. Olave, of course, had a concussion. He didn't play in the game as well. Enough about the Saints. Let's move on. The Giants rookie wide receiver, Malik Nabers, has cleared concussion protocol. They play the Eagles this week, so good news there. Looks like Nabers will be back. Also good news for fans of the Cleveland Browns, maybe not for this season, but for the future. They finally got a stadium approved. They're moving ahead for a dome stadium in the suburbs, and so the Cleveland Browns will have a roof on that stadium. No more snow in the dog pound in the month of December and into January. At least that's what we think will happen. Very big surprise from the world of college basketball. Great coach Tony Bennett of the University of Virginia, with just a couple of weeks before the season began, has decided to retire, and that begins immediately. 16th season with Virginia, and they've been a fantastic team. Maybe not as much in the tournament over the years, but certainly he's had his great moments. Bennett has retired. Five-star quarterback Jared Curtis has decommitted from Georgia, one of the best in the country. Also in college football last night, Marshall beat Georgia State 35-20. They covered the 8.5. Virginia Tech covered their 8.5-point spread against Boston College, 42-21. Tonight in college football, BYU is at home against Oklahoma State. FSU is at Duke, and Nevada, 3.5-point home underdogs against Fresno State. We'll be right back. Matthew Waters is with us from LegalSportsReport.com as we get ready for a big weekend of football and an earnings report coming out from one of the companies that's not named FanDuel or DraftKings, so that's good. Want to tap into some other news today here on the show. Matt, thanks for coming on. Good to catch up.
Always happy to be here, sir. Thanks for having me.
All right, so that coveted third place ranking, so to speak, in the sports betting universe. We know FanDuel and DraftKings have alternated 1-2 for a long time. We know FanDuel has more or less captured more of that share over the last year or so. 3 seemingly up for grabs. ESPN Bet thinks that they're going to have it. BetMGM has, danced around 3, 4. They had an earnings report, Matt. I know you were on the call, so what did you learn?
Yeah, BetMGM is really happy with the way things are going now, Craig. If you remember, the story for BetMGM this year has kind of been a down one. They didn't expect to still be investing so much in the company, and they had to make those investments because when you think about BetMGM, remember that it's owned by MGM Resorts in the US and a company called Entain in the UK. And Entain came in with their European and British betting background, and they thought that would translate to the US, and it just didn't. And they let it go a little too long, essentially, is what their interim CEO said at one point this year. Now they have a new CEO, and Gavin Isaacs. Guy is an industry veteran, and if you're looking for somebody to right your ship, he is certainly one of the pilots you want on it. And so basically what BetMGM is seeing is it's seeing stability in the US. They don't see that market share slipping anymore. They claim 22% of iGaming market share for the third quarter and 8% of sports betting market share for the third quarter, giving them a 15% blended market share, and they're happy with that. Basically, this year they want to hit their numbers, and then they'll start growing next year. And if you remember, Craig, back in August, Nevada's single wallet was added to BetMGM, meaning that when you go to Nevada, if you had an account from Pennsylvania or another state, it will already work in Nevada. And the flip side of that is if you go to Nevada and you sign up a new account, if you go back to a jurisdiction that has BetMGM in it, you can continue to use that same account, that app, really trying to just create less friction for people. And they couldn't give specifics. It hasn't been live that long, but they said, look, we're excited by the opportunity. We'll put it that way. As for profitability, they still don't know where they're exactly going to be on that next year. One of the trends that we've been talking about, Craig, is that it has been cheaper recently for these companies to acquire new customers, whether it be on the iGaming side or the sports betting side. BetMGM plans to spend $750 million all told on customer acquisition this year. And so really, it just comes down to, will the math change, and will it be too expensive next year? And so some of that $750 million won't be spent and drop to the bottom line, or are the metrics going to stay great? And should BetMGM really be looking at maybe bumping that up to an $850 or more? We know that FanDuel has been very aggressive in customer acquisition, and they've said that there's no reason to stop. It's still hitting all their math. And BetMGM has improved its product, Craig. We know that these products are getting closer and closer to what the DraftKings and FanDuels are, and BetMGM now has more markets for all of the major sports. That's leading to a higher hold. It's leading to more legs per parlay. It's doing all those things that kind of bump your bottom line up. So all told, from BetMGM over at Entain, everybody is happy with what they're seeing. Everybody is happy with the way that BetMGM is turning the corner. And now that they see the bleeding stop, so to say, they're ready to see where they can take that momentum and how far it can go.
All right. Well said. And of course, I think all of these companies outside of the top two are, pretty much unknowns, to be honest, moving forward. But good to hear that they are having a positive call. Speaking of positive calls, the commissioner had one when he met with the media ahead of the upcoming NBA season on sports betting. You never know how these things are going to go, Matt, but there are significant partnerships with the sports betting operators and the NBA. And although Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, had said in the past that there was some concern with player props, didn't seem like there were any concerns going into this season, unless I read it wrong. You tell me.
No, you know what? Look, obviously the Jonte Porter issue, when he touched on that, he said that was a cardinal sin. And you just hope that those are really, really limited issues, right? But you can't just look at the bad. You have to look at the good. And this is kind of what Adam Silver's been saying all along. 10 years ago, in November of 2014, he wrote this op-ed for the New York Times that said why sports betting should be legal. And basically, he was the only one in professional sports at that time saying that they should legalize it. The tune from every other sport was, well, it's going to impact the integrity. We don't know how we're going to deal with it, all this kind of stuff. And Adam Silver was much more rational. He said, look, the internet's a thing, people, and they can bet online already if they want to. So why wouldn't we want to have it regulated? And why wouldn't we at least want to have our eyes on what we can have our eyes on to kind of take care of this and make sure everything's going the right way? And, he still said that he would prefer a federal regulation for selfish reasons. It seems he said that it would simply be easier for the NBA at that point to not have to deal with the state-by-state changes. But obviously he said that he could see the appeal for the states to keep it state by state so they can compete on tax rate and all that kind of stuff. The other thing that I thought was really interesting to see him say when he had this interview with the Associated Press, he said that it's never really been about revenue for the NBA. And if you remember a little thing called the integrity fee, Craig, the integrity fee was something that these leagues were trying to get tacked on to like every bet placed in a state so they could get a little bit of revenue. And that fell out of favor pretty quickly. And obviously we know that these leagues have signed, big deals with these sports books to be official partners and this and that. But he said the biggest deal to them has been the engagement. And, when you think about other states, you think about Missouri and how the professional teams are leading the call in Missouri to get sports betting legalized. They see the same thing. They just want to be able to engage with their fans on another level. And Adam Silver says that's been great. Now, I thought this was an interesting quote, though. He wasn't really for or against sports betting in this. He says, I'd put it in the category of other things in society. I wouldn't criminalize them. But on the other hand, that you have to heavily regulate them because if there's not guardrails, people will run afoul and create issues, problems for themselves, potentially for their families, or for operations like us, which I think is totally fair. So interesting to see where he stands 10 years on from this. But man, he was it was ground shaking when he came out with this 10 years ago, Craig. I was just new to the gambling industry, but people couldn't believe that he would come out in an op-ed and say it that bluntly.
Yeah, and he apparently was right. All right, so the NBA starts next week. Let's get to the very latest on Bally. They've been in the news this week for apparently, their sponsorship is ending with these RSNs with Diamond Sports. It looks like FanDuel's taking over there. So that was part of Bally's early news this week. Now we have news that their sports book is opening in a new state. Where is it?
It's Tennessee, Craig, and it's one of those states that you wonder why more sports books aren't in it because there's no license cap in Tennessee. Anybody can go and get a license as long as they qualify. So this is Ballybet's 10th state. If you remember, Craig, Ballybet scrapped the billions they spent on their own technology, and they decided to go with Kambi to provide their technology for them. And they've been slowly moving into states now ever since they've made that change. It's cheaper for them on the long run. The smaller companies, the fixed costs are sometimes cheaper than having to maintain the overall structure of a sports book and everything that goes into running one. So the thing is, Craig, we won't know how Ballybet does in Tennessee. They don't break out revenue or handle or anything like that. They simply tax handle. They're the only state in the country to do that.
Yeah, well, great stuff as always, Matt, and have a great weekend. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, sir. Take care.